And welcome to the Oddity Archive, the show that's never quite sure if it's the hunter or the bear. Now, if that opening line seemed a little awkward, it's because I'm referring to a song on this album, which happens to be the subject of today's show, namely Freedom is a Hammer, Conservative Folk Revolutionaries of the 60s. I know we don't do many album reviews around here, and when we do, they are invariably our least popular shows. Nonetheless, I feel like we should discuss this one because this CD covers some of what was already discussed back on the conservative folk music episode, but was unavailable when that episode premiered. So, let's start with the most familiar artist, by archive standards anyway, Janet Green.
Bill, play the record.
No, not the record. No.
I've heard it said, and it makes me fret. America has a fascist threat.
For the uninitiated, Janet Green was handpicked by Christian anti-communism crusade founder Dr. Frederick C. Schwartz to be the starlet of the woefully unpopular, short-lived, day late and a dollar short conservative folk movement. Green's songs were literally just regurgitated Dr. Schwartz speeches, which in and of itself makes her work something of a small miracle of songwriting. Her work is quite often very catchy and memorable, with Del Casher's quirky, homemade production work accentuating her tunes, quite effectively at that. Now, nobody is ever going to mistake, say, Fascist Threat for a great slice of 60s folk rock. Green's work is more kitsch than anything else, but it's quite listenable kitsch, and it's far and away the main selling point of this album, for me anyway. This disc also rounds up the complete folk rock works of Miss Green, all 8 songs of it.
A nice fur coat to wear, had to get himself a bear. Then he spied the biggest bear he ever saw, was about to squeeze the trigger when the bear held up his paw. Wait a minute, Mr. Hunter, here's the modern thing to do. Go peacefully negotiate both points of view.
There are 3 artists covered on this CD, and we've already discussed one, so let's hit the next one, namely Tony Dolan.
I wish those folks would go and change their slogan. How about all the news that fits we print embellished with a pinkish tint? I'll just have to take up reading the Washington Post, I think. Hey, I'm toking the blues.
Tony Dolan's music career consists of one album. 9 of the tracks from that LP are included here. Dolan decided that he was going to be the conservatives' answer to Phil Ochs. If you're not familiar with Phil Ochs' work, he did a lot of those talking blues protest songs that alternately criticized and satirized the world as he saw it, much like Woody Guthrie and subsequently Bob Dylan had done. Dolan's wordplay is intermittently amusing, but often for the wrong reasons. Join the SDS is about as good as his talking blues cuts get.
Oh, they're the soiled young men who fight for liberty. They know all the 4-letter words, except SOAP. Join the SDS.
Dolan breaks persona briefly with a surprisingly nice ballad called Cry the Beloved Country, no relation to the book.
Cry the beloved country, cry the beloved country, my land, my hope, my home, my dream.
After his soul LP bombed, Dolan became a journalist as well as a fixture on TV talk shows during the 70s. But today, Dolan is best remembered as former President Reagan's chief speechwriter.
Oh, freedom is a hammer, freedom is a hammer, freedom is a hammer, let it ring, let it ring. Freedom is a hammer, freedom is a hammer, freedom is a hammer, may it forever ring.
The final artist on this album is future bluegrass musician Vera Vanderlaan. And while she possesses a strong voice and is far and away the strongest instrumentalist of this particular lot, I have to say that I found her work kind of dull. I can totally imagine hearing this on some college campus in the early 60s, in spite of the fact that her recorded work dates well into the psychedelic era. Vanderland's songs perfectly fit the formula of the folk revival, but that's kind of the problem. The song's structure, chord progressions, and so forth perfectly copy more famous artists of this ilk. It's just the lyrics that set it apart. For some reason, Vanderland gets 12 tracks included on this CD, out of a grand total of 29. And to be frank, it seriously impedes the CD's progress. The songs aren't kitschy enough to be enjoyed, for lack of a better term, ironically, but they're not solid enough to be interesting on their own terms. They just fall through the cracks. Maybe I'm missing something here.
Let's pretend the shame of Cuba really isn't there. Castro is a nice guy who only wants to share in the peace and the prosperity that flourishes today. He doesn't mean us any harm, so if we pretend long enough, our fear will go away. So let's pretend, oh let's pretend.
My biggest criticism of this album is that its focus felt a little narrow with only 3 artists. Even if it meant sacrificing some of the Tony Dolan and Vera Vanderland cuts, I personally would have liked to have seen works from the likes of some other conservative folk oddities like the Goldwaters, and some works from some of the other more famous, i.e. one-hit wonders of this time like Staff Sergeant Barry Sadler and The Spokesman would have been nice, but I have a feeling that licensing would be an issue. And yes, a lot of the aforementioned artists already appear on the Bear Family Records Atomic Platters box set, but Atomic Platters is a huge, cost-prohibitive set, and it would be nice to have more of this stuff on a more accessible package, like this one. I cannot stress enough that this is not the kind of album for the hipster crowd. However, this is something for history buffs, particularly Cold War enthusiasts. So it shouldn't come as any shock that Bill Gearhart, founder of Cold War ephemera heaven Conelrad.com, compiled this CD. This disc marks the CD debut of all the artists involved, and Mr. Gearhart has done as good a job as you can hope for with something this obscure. Sadly, only Janet Green's stuff is from the original master tapes. Everything else is from vinyl, and sadly rather worn-sounding vinyl. Having said that, some obvious thought and care went into the liner notes and the presentation in general, and the mastering job is tastefully done as well. No weird EQ jobs or excessive compression or anything like that. So I gotta give some big brownie points for that. Anyway, that's it for today's archive. Join us next time as the Vera Vanderland fan club stages a massive protest at archive headquarters.
When will we learn? Alas, alack, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Be careful of the commie lies, swallow them and freedom dies. The USA must realize that she's the biggest